is here client-side functionality, what your browser does. Now, normally your browser gets HTML data, and that's what pages are made of, and then it just uses that to draw the page. Now, XHTML is a more modern protocol that's more strict, and so you'll have clickable links like this, ahref equals something, then some text. That's how you make a link you can click, which will then send a request to a server. You can make forms like this, where you have things like name and password and submit, and then it will send it up to the server. Here you tell it what script to send it to on the server and what method to use. This is using the unwise get method to send a name and password, which is not a good security procedure, but you can certainly do it. You can send any kind of parameter anywhere in the request. So it'll send this request. It will get the cookielogin.php, and it'll put the username and password right here in the URL. And then it'll have the same stuff down here like refer and all this jazz. Then there's this thing called multi-part form data, where the browser generates random boundary text. This is screwy looking. It generates this junk, WebKit form boundary, and then a bunch of random letters. And it divides blocks of data by that. I don't understand the point of this, but that really happens. That's what this stuff is, multi-part form data. Sometimes they use that. I don't know why. And then there's cascading style sheets, which are used to make your page look prettier. They specify the format of elements, so you could specify that all the header 2 tags will now have a red color. And you can do things like put these curvy borders around things like I have on my website. People complained a lot about my website looking like it was from 1993, so I finally learned a little bit of CSS, and now my website looks a little better. But modern people use WordPress, and all the sites all look sort of corporate and clean, and my website never got there because I'm not using any of the modern techniques. Anyway, and JavaScript has become the #1 language of the web. Everybody uses these JavaScript frameworks like Angular that gives you a whole bunch of methods, and it's big and heavy, but people get used to using it, and then you can make websites that look very modern and professional and corporate. And it uses the document object model to specify everything in the browser. The page is a container, and you can refer to every element on the page, every header tag, every form field, every image. You can modify it. Now, Microsoft made a product to compete with JavaScript called VBScript, Visual Basic Script, and I think they've now finally abandoned it. It no longer supported in Edge. When they moved to Edge from Internet Explorer, they gave up on it, so it's pretty much extinct. Here's the document object model. Your document is here. That's the whole page in your browser. Then you have a root element HTML. Then you have a head and body. In the body, you've got things like anchor tags and header tags and text and images. And you can refer to in this cascading ordered object, subobject. You can refer to every element on the page and then have a script that does something with it. So here, I have a page down. This is going to take a script that's going to fill the thing called demo with hello world. And here I have a paragraph tag called demo that closes and doesn't have any text in it. So when you load this, you see hello world there, but the hello world is not literally on the page here. It's in this script. This is how you can do it. Using the document object model, you can change any part of the page to be anything you want. And this is how you make dynamic content that changes. And this is fundamentally how all the modern JavaScript frameworks work. And Ajax, as I mentioned, lets you fetch small amounts of data from the server, and that's what you use for things like Google Maps. When you drag the Google Map down, it loads just the little bit of information it needs to draw the next little bit here, so it can dynamically refresh it. And you'll see all these requests going by. Many, many requests going to the server to load every little bit of it as you drag it around. That's Ajax. And JSON, which somebody used for their handle today, is JavaScript object notation. This is how you refer to data in JavaScript. You have curly braces to delimit a hunk of data, and then you have name, value for parameters. It's just a different way to order information, but that's JavaScript object notation. So you can update data with it. I can say I'm posting it, and my content type is form URL encoded, and here's my JSON. So the object name contact has a bunch of parameters inside there, name, ID, and email, and there they are in this JSON format. The same origin policy, as I mentioned, means that the cookies stored on your browser know what site they go to, and they will only be sent to that site. So that's really important. And so if I was able to trick your browser into thinking you're at one site when you aren't, like thinking you're at Yahoo when you aren't, it would send the Yahoo cookies, and there's a whole series of attacks that violate the same origin policy. And I think you'll see some of them in the hands-on projects. But that's the plan. And that's what, when this process fails, you get cross-site requests, cross-site scripting, cross-site request forgery, and so on. That's where you trick something that should only run on one site to run on a different site than where it belongs. And we'll do quite a lot of that in the projects. So that's the game. Here's the same origin policy, the heart of what security there is on the web, which is not all that much, as we're going to see. HTML5 is a new version of HTML, and what it did was include ways to include videos and advanced content on your page that used to require extensions like Flash, and you don't pretty much need that anymore. Now HTML5 built into the fundamental protocol has most of that advanced stuff you need. Web 2.0 is the modern web, which is very interactive. The old web is like my site, just a page you can look at. It's the same page all the time, the same page for everybody. Web 2.0 is where everybody gets to look at a different page, like a different Google map, a different Amazon shopping site. So what's happening on the server is much more complicated. And like I said, there used to be all these browser extensions, Flash and ActiveX and Java and Silverlight, even one of Microsoft's products. These things had a lot of security problems, and they're pretty much extinct. HTML5 has pretty much rendered them all obsolete. All right, so you have some stateful data. To add a state to the fundamentally stateless HTTP, that's held in a structure called a session, which contains data like items in a shopping cart, and some state data is stored on the client. You can configure your server to store data somewhere, or you can just store it in cookies and bounce it off the client every time. And developers often don't know which of those things they're doing, which leads to vulnerabilities where they trust something on the client, which they shouldn't. That's a common flaw. So you have to encode data that goes back and forth. URLs can only contain printable ASCII characters, which only goes from hex 20, which is 32, up to 7E. There are a whole lot of binary bytes that are not printable, so if you want to transfer them, they have to be URL encoded, and the most common way is to use a percent sign and then 2 characters here. So for example, by the way, if you go up here to a page, like if I go to one of my pages, I could include a space in a file name, and if I did, I could type a space here and then enter, and it will turn into %20. You saw it there briefly. %20 is a code for a space. That's a %32. And you can send any kind of binary data with a percent there. You can represent, you can go %01, %02, and that's valid in a URL. That's going to send a byte of 1 and a byte of 2, which is not a printable character. All right. So here they are, there's a space, there's a new line, there's a null byte, and so on. You can also use a plus, which is a symbol that stands for a space. Anyway, then there's Unicode encoding, because in the modern world, 1 byte is not enough for a character. That was enough in the 70s and 80s when all we cared about was English, but now we got Chinese and Japanese and Arabic and everything, so we use Unicode, which can have up to 4 bytes for 1 character. That's %U followed by some hexadecimal numbers, so you can express things like this, E with an accent, and so on. Microsoft Unicode is a very old version that uses only 16 bits per character. Modern UTF-8 is the one that can go from 1 to 4 bytes for characters, and it's got all the fancy characters like the hamburger and all the emoticons and everything, and all the commercially significant languages is what people say, Arabic and Chinese and Japanese and everything else. And so you might have 3 bytes to express a character like that, a not equal thing. Then there's HTML encoding. Inside an HTML page, if you wanted to send, for example, a less than symbol to print on the page, if you literally include a less than symbol, it'll be interpreted as the start of an HTML tag and it won't appear in the browser. If you actually want this symbol to appear on the page, you have to put %LT semicolon. Then it will draw a less than sign on the page. So this is called HTML encoding, and it's a powerful security feature, as we're going to see, to block cross-site scripting. We'll be doing all that in the projects. And so you can also do HTML encoding with a decimal form with the ampersand pound. Now you can put hexadecimal characters here. So you can code any byte you want to be as part of an HTML page. And there's base64 encoding, which has been around for a really long time because the main purpose is email. Email was written only to move text, so it only allows you to have printable characters. And then people wanted to put images in their email, and the images use all eight bits in the byte, so you had to encode binary data in text. And that's how this works. It uses the capital letters, the lowercase letters, the numbers, and then two more symbols, usually plus and slash. That's a total of 64 characters, so that's enough to encode 6 bits. And so you have to take the 8-bit bytes and encode them in groups of 6 bits at a time. So it'll take 4 characters to encode 3 bytes. 24 bits is normally broken up into 3 8-bit bytes, but in base64, you take 24 bits and break it up into 4 6-bit characters, and each one of those you encode as one of these. So you have a string of gibberish letters which encodes binary data. That's base64. And then there's hex encoding, where you just write down the hexadecimal values of each byte. So 41 is a capital A, 42 is a capital B, and so on. So you have 2 characters for every character here. That's hex encoding. You'll commonly see that. You see it in Wireshark, you see it all over the place, and in raw hex viewers like HXD. And then you can use server-side APIs. There's a bunch of these things that let you do remoting and serialization frameworks that will try to take a string of data and encapsulate it into an object that's sent up to the server. And there are a lot of flaws that come out of this when there are ways to make mistakes the way data is unwrapped. We'll see those in the projects. So let's do the last Kahoot, which is here. 3D, there we go. Well, yeah, it's a good t-shirt. I was happy. Cactus Con had good ones this year. Cactus Con is an Arizona convention. It's fun. They often have very good art at Cactus Con. A couple of years ago, they had a whole bunch of art that was cactuses playing video games and flying spaceships and stuff. It was pretty cute. One time, our cyber team went to Cactus Con and competed in their contest there. So sometimes we do things like that. And if you go to my homepage, you can add your name to the form if you want to get on the competition team. Very good thing to do for your career, but it's more difficult than all our classes. It's for people where you're willing to do something far beyond these classes. Try to get up to competing strength in hacking and defending, for that matter. All right. All right, what system defines formats like that? Specify a particular kind of paragraph. That's cascading style sheets. That's what that stuff is. Used to format all the data on modern websites, all the text on modern websites, and other things. All right, what technology is now obsolete? VBScript, good. All right. Which system requests data from the server without refreshing the entire page? That's Ajax. All right. And what system writes a space like that? That's HTML encoding. I learned this when I learned what web design I know. This is how you make a non-breaking space. There's no tab characters in HTML, but you can make spaces to move things over. That's how you make a space. All right. But if you learn CSS, you can actually have something like a tab. 9. And Mythic use JSON. All right. Let's stop this recording. Find it. There we go.